Um, Hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining this call, which is on a technical presentation of the NeoFinGo protocol. We have all of our partners here, which is really great. My name is Divij. I'm from ODI Global. I'm a research fellow. We also have representatives of the 24-hour Economy Authority at the Government of Ghana. We have representatives from the British High Commission and AFTA as well. And I wanted to hand it over to one of our partners, Arnold Parker, who will briefly introduce the session before we move on to today's keynote speakers. Over to you, Arnold.
Thank you very much, Vivish. And well, it's a good morning from Accra and from wherever you may have dialed in today as well. We are all grateful that you're here. On behalf of the presidential advisor on the 24-hour economy of Ghana, I invite and welcome all of you to today's session. It essentially is going to be one that we are introducing a new platform and framework for which we can open and digitize an existing trade corridor, which for years has been formal. But with this new approach, we are seeking to explore how we can now open the taps for a lot of visionary young business people across the country to then be able to tap into one of the largest and most important trade corridors in Europe. And so you are all very most welcome. As the program unfolds, we believe it's going to be one that would be illuminating indeed. And we wish to have a very great session today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Arnold. And we're very pleased to have some excellent speakers here to also kick us off for this discussion. Ndidi Nuneli is the CEO of the One campaign, who's done some excellent work thinking about what African entrepreneurs need and what SMEs in particular need to unlock their potential in global trade. Ndidi, over to you for your opening remarks, please.
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. And Didi Muneli, I'm actually dialing in from Washington, D.C. And I'm so proud of the government of Ghana and the UK government and ODI for kicking off this partnership. It's really timely and important. At the One campaign, we fight for the investments to ensure healthier lives and economic opportunity in Africa. And our vision is that Africa is an equal player. As we've examined all the drivers of growth to ensure that we can fully finance our own health, economic drivers are rooted in trade. Fair, transparent, accountable trade. And digital trade is key at this moment. Why is digital trade more important than ever before? Because number one, we have a booming creative industry, technology sector, our financial systems on the continent have demonstrated that they are not only innovative, agile, but are ready for greater collaborations. In the past, there's been a negative bias associated with investing in the African continent. And I applaud the UK government for demonstrating commitments to fostering greater collaborations and ensuring free and fair trade. I recently served as the champion for the ADF replenishment for the African Development Bank and was in the UK in December, where we historically raised over $11 billion to drive investment on the African continent. And a key pillar of the ADF replenishment was trade. So when I was asked to join you this morning, I was excited to see that the UK continues to demonstrate leadership in this way. I also applaud the Ghanaian government, and we know that under the leadership of President Mahama, we have seen the Accra Reset and a strong commitment to driving growth on the continent and leading from Ghana. And as an entrepreneur who has worked extensively across Africa and in Ghana in agriculture and food systems, I have seen the power of trade to unlock jobs, to unlock growth, to ensure inclusive growth, and to ensure gender equity. And in the face of all the challenges we face globally, but also with climate challenges, this is timely and important. So congratulations to everyone. I want to give a special recognition to Bright Simmons on this call for his leadership on all things digital and transparency and accountability on the African continent. And that brings me to why digital trade is more important and financial innovation in digital trade is most important. And I'll say there are three levers that I hope that we will follow through today. Number one is the importance of transparency, accountability, and equity. What we have seen with innovation on many, many platforms and in many countries, that sometimes innovation happens, but it's not inclusive, it's not transparent, it's not equitable. And as this gateway is launched and designed, the importance of that transparency, accountability, and equity is more important than ever before. And I know ODI Global shares my convictions, as we often have partnered with ODI at the One campaign. And this is really important when it comes to digital payments. Because there are hidden costs. We've seen this with remittance providers. We've seen this with many, many of the financial instruments that have been utilized on the African continent before, which have perpetuated some of the continuous debt distress inequity that we've seen. So I'm promoting and encouraging that as we drive through with the gateway and the reforms, hinging on the back of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, but more specifically on the trade corridor that you're unlocking between the UK and Ghana, that all financial players and remittance providers commit to transparency, accountability, equity, and the removal of bias. There are lots of risk hedging instruments that can be utilized, and also currency protection instruments that ensure that every player, especially the entrepreneurs on the ground, are not worse off for engaging in digital trade. The second key component and value I'd like to underscore is the critical need for value addition. And I know I've used the word value multiple times, because what we've often seen with trade on the continent is that sometimes the value is held elsewhere. And the beauty of Ghana is not only do we have culture, innovation, technology, but we also have a dynamic and bolstering youth population, and they can add value. I'll tell a quick story that I had a birthday on Sunday, and I decided, in addition to the wonderful Niger jollof, to add peanut soup from Ghana. And when I went on the internet, on YouTube, to find the recipe, it was a Ghanaian food entrepreneur who was able to teach me how to make wonderful peanut soup. Why do I share this? Because that is digital trade. By going on her YouTube page to learn a recipe, she is getting compensated. But the question is, how much of that compensation aligns for musicians, for cultural leaders, and how are they compensated by YouTube and other streaming profiles relative to other creatives around the world? And I hope that the UK markets will open up to the creatives from Ghana and from across Africa and pay them equitably for their knowledge, their culture, their innovation. And the value addition means that there's more growth in our continent, and that we're continuing to change narratives, because digital innovation and financial access allows us to do so. And then the final lever, and for me, I am praying that this is just one of the many. UK has shown leadership. We want the rest of Europe to come alongside us. We want this gateway to unlock not just new forms of capital, growth capital, fair financing, but also to unlock the potential that we've leveraged and talked about for too long on the African Continental Free Trade Area. And my hope is that this and the results from this, both the learnings, will be widely shared with other African countries and serve as a model and a beacon of hope for us all. Ultimately, we will come back in a year's time to see what has Ghana and the UK been able to unlock. What new trading routes, what new partnerships, what new innovations, and what new entrepreneurship relationships that have added value, created wealth, and created jobs for our young people. So once again, I say congratulations. I thank you for this innovation, and you can count on the support of the One campaign to continue to not only learn alongside you, but amplify the success of this great work. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much, Ndidi, for laying out those opportunities so clearly. That was a wonderful opening statement to get us started for the day. I'd like to now invite August Stano, the presidential advisor to the 24-hour economy, to give some remarks on this initiative as well, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. as you may well know, the 25 program is
Augustus, sorry, I'm very sorry. Your video appears to be off. Could you turn that on if possible?
if I put the video on it will freeze, huh?
Oh, okay. Is that all right?
Yes.
In which case, this is
So
fine.
you can see me very quickly and then we'll go back, all right? So good morning, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity for the 24-hour program to participate in this important initiative, the NeoFinGo initiative. The 24-hour program is dedicated to transforming Ghana's economy and driving the private sector as the main agent and tool for transformation. One of the key components of the program is developing a strong ecosystem for small and medium enterprises to thrive. The NeoFinGo initiative falls very squarely within this framework because it provides access to trade payment systems that hitherto were unavailable to small entrepreneurs who want to export to the UK through the UK Africa corridor. It's an important opportunity, and we believe that it will extend and expand trade and provide an important example of how we can also adapt this for inter-African trade within the AFTA protocols. So congratulations. Our team, led by Arnold today and NAS, will continue to engage. And at the point in time where we have to do the official launch with ODI, they'll be available to support you fully. Thank you very much. This is an important intervention. And we believe that part of our mandate as 24-hour is to also accelerate exports from Ghana. And this is a new and important corridor that definitely our SMEs will be encouraged to tap into. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Augustus. And yes, it's lovely to be developing this partnership, I think, amongst everyone here. And of course, none of this would also be possible without the support of the UK government. And we're really glad to have His Excellency, the High Commissioner for the British High Commission in Ghana, Christian Rogge here. Christian, would you like to deliver some remarks about your support to this program as well?
Yep, very happy to do so. Can I just check you can see me and the camera is working?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you fine. Thanks so much.
Perfectly. Perfect. Okay. Thanks. So hello also from me in Accra as well. And hello to other colleagues dialing in from Accra, from the UK, from elsewhere in Africa and around the world. So we're very happy to join the conversation today, and I can see also a couple of colleagues from the British government are online as well. So today is a bit more of a technical conversation, but then we're also really looking forward to the events that are happening in 2 days, the dual city event in London and Accra. So I guess today is a bit the appetizer to set us up for those events as well. But let me just say a few words regarding the UK's interest in partnering in supporting this initiative. And the first one I think has already come to light when you just look at the people who have spoken and who are on the agenda today. From our perspective, it's a really exciting constellation of players coming together to focus on one issue, whether that is the 24-hour secretariat, whether that is other stakeholders from Ghana, like the Bank of Ghana, whether it is regional bodies like the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, but also key stakeholders like ODI Global, like the One Campaign and so on, that bring reach beyond just Ghana and the UK. And of course, we're particularly interested in working with stakeholders who haven't spoken yet, but who are critical to this endeavor, from the financial institutions, fintech innovators, regulators, and development partners, technology experts. So it's quite a fascinating constellation of people working together, focusing on one issue. And then let me say a few words about why the UK is committed to this particular endeavor and why we're excited to support it. as speakers have already mentioned, there's huge potential when it comes to cross-border trade, when it comes to cross-border trade finance, when it comes to digital trade. But there are quite a few questions that have surfaced. They're about the efficiency, they're about the transparency, and they're also about the openness and inclusivity in terms of who is able to participate. And here we're really excited about the focus on small and medium enterprises and broadening the access and creating a platform that works for them as well. And when you look at the UK's approach in this space more generally, I think that our commitment to strengthening digital trade infrastructure has been quite clear for some time, and likewise the efforts underway to modernize the systems that have been used for a while. One good example is the UK Electronic Trade Documents Act in 2023, which is relatively recent, but then also engagement that we have here in Ghana to really partner what is a very vibrant fintech community. So the initiative in terms of what we hope to achieve with it is very much focused on the ambitions that the UK has around fair, efficient, and modernized trading system, is very much about what Ghana's aspirations are as articulated, particularly through the 24-hour economy secretariat, and then also what the regional aspirations are under the Africa Continental Free Trade area. And the last thing I wanted to say is that the event today also falls sort of in the middle of what we consider a campaign launched last year, which is the London to Accra campaign to connect capitals for economic growth. So that really has focused minds in terms of the unique collaboration we have between two cities here as well. London being one of the greatest financial centers in the world, a global hub for innovation as well in this space, and Accra as a gateway to Africa, with a very dynamic economy and a very ambitious government to broaden that space. And when you then look at the connections between the two capital cities, it really stands out how active the diaspora is, how much happens in terms of Ghanaian entrepreneurs, British entrepreneurs, Ghanaian British entrepreneurs, often in one person, and really making that effort as a really exciting opportunity to build on that and take it to you.
Thanks so much, Christian. You got cut off for just the last 10 seconds. Would you like to repeat that, or should we move forward? Is that fine?
I think you can continue. I was broadly just saying how excited we were to partner on this again.
Great.
Back to you.
Thanks so much. And that was a really interesting intervention. And the things you noted, I also wanted to take this back to everybody who's joined us online and is watching. You mentioned all of the ecosystem of players that we need involved in this initiative, from SMEs to fintech to bankers, to people interested in the trade environment in general. And I'm sure many of those people are here with us on the webinar as attendees. And I'd really encourage you to please keep the conversation going amongst yourselves in the chat. There's a Q&A function. If you have any questions about anything that's coming up, please feel free to post this, and our panelists and representatives would be very, very happy to answer those questions as well. And of course, you mentioned the regional perspective, and we're really happy also to have partnered with AFTA on this initiative. We have Cynthia Nasingbe, who is representing the regional perspective through AFTA. And Cynthia, I'd invite you to share your comments with us now, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Program Director, and Your Excellency, distinguished participants, colleagues, and partners. It's really a pleasure to join you today for this important, I'll say, technical consultation on the NeoFinGo initiative. I think from the Secretariat point of view, our mandate is clear. It's really to facilitate the effective implementation of the agreement and to support the development of a competitive, integrated, and inclusive African market. And central to this ambition, of course, is ensuring that trade is not only possible, but it is scalable, accessible, and impactful, particularly for African enterprises. We know that we have the numbers. One of the most persistent constraints to intra-Africa trade remains access to trade finance. And across the continent, SMEs, women and youth entrepreneurs, those businesses that represent over 90% of our economic landscape continue to face those structural barriers in accessing the financial instruments required to engage in cross-border trades. And of course, these include letters of credit, guarantees, settlement systems that are often not designed, let me put it that way, to accommodate smaller transaction sizes or emerging market actors. So the consequence that we see is that there is significant trade finance gap with a substantial volume of commercially viable trades that remain unrealized. And of course, it impacts Africa's ability to industrialize, to diversify, export, and fully leverage on the opportunities presented by the AFCFTA. So we have to address this constraint. It is truly central to the successful implementation of the agreement. And in this context, initiatives such as the NeoFinGo protocol really present for us a potentially important contribution to evolving trade finance, to the evolving of trade finance ecosystem, because by leveraging digital technologies, leveraging on the AFCFTA digital trade protocol that is now, has that framework. That frameworks will also allow us to facilitate, the issuance, validation, and settlement of trade transactions, and such approaches definitely can help expand access to trade finance, particularly for SMEs and the underserved segments of the market. Importantly, and I think this is something that the project is putting a focus on, it's really the focus that we are putting on standards, alignment, interoperability, and compliance. All these are all aligned with the AFCFTA protocol, specifically the protocol on digital trade, which we see today as really that framework that can allow us to develop such initiatives. So any solution must operate within a framework that ensures trust, regulatory alignment, and of course, scalability across jurisdictions. So why is it that we are interested and we see this as a very important initiative? It's because again, our engagement in this initiative should be understood within the broader context of our mandate. And so the agreement is not just limited to facilitating trade between African countries in isolation. It is designed really to position Africa more competitively within regional, but also global value chains. And this includes, enabling more complex trade configurations, such as cross-border value chains within Africa, but also between Africa and the rest of the world. Trade evolving African and non-African, partners, sort of trade that involves African but also non-African partners, regional production networks supported by integrated logistics and financial systems. And so in this regard, the development of digital trade infrastructure, including trade finance solutions, is really essential to operationalizing the AFCFTA. As I said earlier, we have the AFCFTA digital architecture, including the evolving AFCFTA hub that we have developed with our partners from Afro Champions, is really intended to support such innovations by providing a framework for data integration, documentation, and interoperability across member states. So we welcome all these type of initiatives, and pilots such as the Ghana-UK corridor pilot provide for us an opportunity to test new approaches within a controlled environment with the potential for replication, of course, across the continent. As indicated in the ambition is really to develop a model that can be scaled and adapted across AFCFTA state parties, and we hope that this is where we are going to go. And the role of the Secretariat in such initiatives will be really to ensure alignment with AFCFTA frameworks and protocols, to support standardization and interoperability, and also to facilitate the coordination with member states and relevant institutions. Lastly, it will also be to promote, to use our convening power to promote scalability and replication. At the same time, it is also essential that such initiatives remain anchored within really our priorities. So in conclusion, distinguished participants, I think what I could say is that digital trade finance solutions, if well designed and aligned with continental frameworks, can really play an important role in bridging existing gaps and enabling broader participation in trade. And so we therefore welcome continued dialogue on this initiative. We look forward to further technical engagement to ensure alignment with AFCFTA objectives and implementation priorities. And of course, we as the Secretariat, we remain committed to working with partners to advance solutions that are practical, scalable, and inclusive, and that contribute meaningfully to Africa's economic transformation. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for those remarks. And absolutely, this is so crucial in the context of everything that's been happening with the AfTA and the Digital Trade Protocol, as you mentioned. And I'm sure we're all now waiting very keenly to also hear more about the NeoFinGo protocol itself and what's been underway and how it's been planned out. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Arnold for a discussion of and to run us through the protocol development itself. Thank you. Over to you, Arnold.
Thank you very much, Divish. And I think at this time as well, we would grant permission to our presidential advisor, who would have to be in another crucial session. And so we are most grateful for, his time and his presence here today. And we thank him so much as he shepherds us to the next phase of this initiative. Over the next few slides, I would be attempting to present an overview of this digital finance corridor, being NeoFinGo. And I do hope that we'll be able then to have a full appreciation of what it seeks to do. So if we move on to the next slide, it's just to really talk about the numbers, talk about how this really pans out today and what the situation is. So you do have a $120 billion trade finance gap, I must say. Now, essentially, this gap is what remains unfinanced, and it just basically goes to show the enormous potential that we could essentially then be taking full advantage of where trade finance is concerned. Now, what this has then done is that the finance gap also then feeds into what you would call a procedural gap or challenge, because then very few SMEs are able to actually be able to initiate proper trade finance instruments. And so if you look at the data available today, 70 to 80% of LC, letter of credit submissions to financial institutions, first submissions would usually contain at least one error. And that then means is that there is a lot of back and forth in how eventually trade documentation is finalized before transactions actually occur. We also are seeing that a lot of SMEs in Africa continue to remain very small, which then means that somehow they are locked out of the trade corridor. And this is actually one of the key reasons then why we don't see this $120 billion gap being closed soon. There's also a challenge, and this challenge has to do with corresponding banking relationships between Africa and the rest of the world. And so in the last 2 years, for instance, 40% of correspondent banking relationships have been lost, either suspended, curtailed, and these are usually for various reasons. Some would be from sovereign ratings, others would be from collateral mismanagement, others would also then be from documentations, others also come from sanctions, and then also from anti-money laundering issues. And so essentially, this becomes a challenge, and it creates the kind of information asymmetry that doesn't allow for trade to be quite smooth between the UK-Ghana corridor. Now, one of the challenges also that we see today is lack of verification, for instance. So a buyer in the UK would not have the requisite tools for ascertaining the veracity of claims or orders, and there isn't enough data that allows them to then place orders in a way that gives them the assurance that supplies will be done. There's also the compliance challenge where the KYC AML costs of being able to validate or understand where SMEs are still remains a challenge. And then, of course, the documentation issue. I mean, the documentation issue has been so rampant that it has taken the regulator in recent times having to now issue new guidelines on documentation just to promote cross-border trade, for instance. And so there is a big problem. We see that, yes, the UK remains Ghana's fourth largest trading partner, but it appears that even with that, there's still so much more that can be done. And that is where we are with the problem today. On the next slide, for instance, we begin a process of now looking at where NeoFinGo sits and what we can then do in partnership with NeoFinGo from a 24-hour perspective. So first is product transformation to re-engineer how Ghana produces. Now, in 24, what we've started doing under Agri Transformation Program known as Grow 24 is to begin to create agroecological parks that are properly organized and properly managed by anchor farmers and cooperatives of farms. Now, what that would then do is that we want to move away from the incidence of having several hundreds of thousands of smallholder farms who are disparate, scattered across the country and not organized in any meaningful manner, to now begin a process of organizing them. So the average farm size in Ghana today is around 4 acres. You usually not have proper segmentation of what they produce, and you don't also have proper clusters of how production is being done. We are changing this in 24 into agroecological parks where minimum park sizes for around 200 to 500 acres. You can organize a few hundred farmers, and then under the auspices of a cooperative, be able to then organize what they produce and what they harvest and how we then link it to markets. And so on the 24-hour side, there's a production transformation, which we are beginning to initiate. Then there's also the supply chain and market efficiency initiative, which we call Connect 24. And what we are then seeking to do, and this is in the larger sense of reducing post-harvest losses, which today is estimated at somewhere around $3 billion per annum for Ghana, is that we now are creating the systems and the platforms that will enable us to move produce from farm to market, from farm to factory, and then from farm to table in some instances. And that's also underway. Now, the supply chain and market efficiency processes would also include initiatives like cold chain storage and warehouses at various centers, because once you've been able to organize agro parks, you can then attach power and cold chain facilities to them. It would also then include creating cargo hubs where goods and commodities can be moved easily as well. And then there's some level of human capital development, which in 24 we call a SPA. And essentially what we are then seeking to do is to create a cadre of young people properly equipped and trained with the requisite digital and technical know-how to then be able to work across the value chain. And so essentially what these three key initiatives will do first is that it gives us the strength to be able to substitute imports. And then secondly, it makes us competitive, globally competitive. And then this, we believe, now opens the door for us to then be able to move properly and more efficiently into the trade corridors. So not only are we trying to solve the access to trade markets for Ghanaian SMEs, we're actually trying to now even solve the base, which is the fact that Ghanaian companies by themselves should also be even more productive and be more competitive to then be able to reach into global markets. And so on the next slide, what we then seek to do is to explore the opportunity that NeoFinGo brings. And this essentially is at the heart of what we are trying to do today. So first, NeoFinGo is a platform that bridges the gap between UK neobanks and African fintech ecosystems. So what we are saying today is that we no longer need to rely solely on the banking system, for instance, for us to be able to go through the process of letters of credit and all of that. In fact, if you look at the data from the banks, I would say that more than half of trade transactions are now occurring under bills for payment rather than even letters of credit. And so, NeoFinGo opens the door now to allow neobanks, or as we call them in Ghana, fintechs, to then be able to establish digital financial instruments that can then be used to facilitate trade. And so, first and foremost, there is trust and transparency because these records are smart, they are captured every layer and aspect of the transaction. They are efficient and inclusive because it reduces, first and foremost, the cost of establishing a proper trade finance or trade instrument. It also then allows a lot more people to then be able to be roped into trade. And then there's shared governance, which is the fact that there's equal oversight. And so even though this is anchored mainly on a lot of the laws and acts that have been passed in the UK to make these financial instruments, the creation of these financial instruments possible, it actually has to work in partnership with Ghanaian fintechs and other financial institutions to then be able to be actualized. And so on the next slide, for instance, we look at how the workings of the corridor essentially happens. So first and foremost, there's the onboarding of exporters. It means that we need to now create a process for bringing SMEs on board the program through the various fintechs that we'll be partnering with. There's also then validation, which is an AI-enabled process to allow for whatever issues that there are in the trade instrument process, whatever issues that there are to then be resolved. Then there's smart record. And so essentially a smart record would be one that first and foremost is available, everyone sees it, and it can actually now be traced. So there's a traceability of the record from endpoint to endpoint. There's less human intervention to minimize level of errors. Then we have the UK bank confirmation process. Now they would do the underwriting, they would ensure that these transactions are actually ready to go, and we can then see settlement happening. Now, settlement and payment is also adopting a nostril-like model, and essentially what that then means is that we could even have situations of same-day settlement. And because all these processes have been followed, it means that for an SME, you don't have to export and then await payments in another 3 to 4 months or usually a number of days. But even if that has to be the case, what it then means is that the transparency of the platform allows for other financial instruments to even be created to then deliver liquidity to the SMEs and ensure that they are essentially producing and being paid in real time. And so at this point, what NeoFinGo offers is that we are moving from 14-day cycle of traditional repayments to same-day repayments. We are reducing error rates from 70% upwards to near zero discrepancies. And then also we are almost eliminating the issue of collateral to using reputation as capital. I mean, establishing an LC with a bank today in Ghana requires enormous amounts of paperwork, levels of collateral and all of that. And that then obviously tends to slow down, which is really the reason why a lot of the banking system relies more on bills for payments rather than through the LC process. And so essentially, NeoFinGo is that platform and the architecture built to digitize the letter of credit processes to then allow SMEs to then be able to export and receive payments in real time. On the next slide, for instance, we are looking at what the policy framework is and how partners are also evolving within this ecosystem. So first, there's the UK ETDA 2023, and essentially this is the Electronic Transactions and Documentations Act, which creates the environment, the legal and regulatory framework under which all of this can happen. There's also an equivalent law in Ghana, which is the Electronic Transactions Act, but the ETDA in the UK is primarily created and designed to ensure that all these processes, which are traditional, can actually be digitized in ways that allows for the smooth flow of trade finance. Then there's the Bank of Ghana Policy Sandbox. Now, for NeoFinGo to work and thrive, essentially it's going to have to receive regulatory approval. Banks are going to have to go to the Bank of Ghana to receive approval before they can sign up. Fintechs would have to also receive approval. Now, because this is new and it's quite, should I say, novel in its approach to facilitating trade, we would first host NeoFinGo on the policy sandbox. And the sandbox is the space where new technologies and platforms like NeoFinGo can be tested, and it allows for speed to market. It allows for us to then be able to fully validate the claims that the system has, and then we can then fully launch it out. So it's essentially important that as we continue on this journey, we will engage the Bank of Ghana to have their buy-in, support, and approval, then to be able to roll this out in mass. Then, of course, there's the 24-Hour Economic Authority, which is set up essentially to embark on a national transformation program, working across with all ministries, departments, and agencies across the various levels of government to deliver an economic research agenda for the government. And we, at our end, will ensure that as many SMEs as possible are onboarded, as many SMEs that want to be able to trade across borders have the capacity and capability to do so. And then most importantly, we also have the Africa Free Trade and Continental Area Hub, which essentially is the backbone being built to facilitate trade across Africa. You want to ensure that in opening the Ghana-UK finance corridor and building the capability for Ghanaian SMEs to export easily to the UK, once that capability has been built, we should then be able to cascade that capability across the continent to take advantage of Africa free trade. And so NeoFinGo, starting from a Ghana UK trade finance corridor platform, can essentially now be scaled across the continent so that it now even becomes easier. And this would align perfectly with the cross-border directives that was recently issued by the Bank of Ghana, for instance, in how we then proceed to trade amongst ourselves in Africa. So that is where we are, and that is how we are looking at NeoFinGo today. On the next slide, we talk about who the beneficiaries would be. So first and foremost, African SME exporters, because what we are doing is that we are creating digital LCs and allowing them to then be able to export at ease. Next set of beneficiaries, UK neobanks and fintechs. So fintechs that are based out of the UK and then neobanks as well would also have a chance to then obviously be able to see that transactions from Africa can be quite substantial indeed. And it also creates data sets to allow them to even develop and introduce more products that we can utilize across the continent. Ghanaian diaspora in the UK. And so today there are nearly a little above 300,000 Ghanaians in the UK. A lot of them do a lot of imports from Ghana into the UK, and this cuts across several products. By structuring and formalizing this trade process, what we then do is that we give them a chance, first and foremost, to have access to even more Ghanaian products, but secondly, to then enable them to also formalize their businesses and their approaches to trade so that it's a win-win situation across borders. And then there's also regulatory and policy benefits as well. So for the regulator, it means that a lot of the trade that may have essentially been informal and undocumented and restricted, now we've created a window that allows for more data to be available. We can see essentially where the trade flows are, where the trade corridors are. It would inform policy on how we then undertake our trade partnership discussions. It would inform policy on how we focus on certain key industries as well, and how we also become competitive across certain key value chains. On the next slide, we look at what the potential impact can be for Ghana. So for the first 4 months, we are essentially targeting some key sectors. So first, cocoa derivatives, or cocoa and its derivative products, cashew, shea, textiles, and then creative technology. Now, at the foundation stage, which is the first 4 months, we need to develop the protocols for all of this to happen, which also requires some level of legal structuring. We are going to onboard a number of new banks, onboard at least about 5 Ghanaian fintechs to join in the sandbox space. And then also, we would also be undertaking the documentation process for the instruments. Now, when we move into the sprint phase, which is in the next 6 to 8 months, we are looking at how the first disbursement and netting cycles will look like. We expect to have onboarded about 200 exporters. And then also we would create a live dashboard, which allows all stakeholders to have real-time insights into what's occurring on the platform. Now, in terms of scale, we expect that to be happening from the 9th to 16th month. Would have expanded the base of this to 500 exporters, would add a number of corridors, trade corridors. So from a Ghana to UK corridor, we're now going to add Sierra Leone, would add Nigeria, and then we'll add Kenya. So it then means that we would have been able to expand this beyond the borders of Ghana into other African countries. And also to note that these countries also have a very strong trade relationship with the UK. So we are essentially then building an ecosystem for trade to happen in real time. We would have also then incorporated AI chatbots to allow for simplified workflows, allow for SMEs and exporters to be able to address their issues in real time. And then from month 17 to 24, which is a year and a half to 2 years from now, we want to then be able to undertake independent evaluation of the platform, how the digital LCs have rolled out, and then also have a learning case study that we can hand over to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to then use as an enablement platform to facilitate and increase the scale of trade across the continent. So between 2026 to 2030, these are some of the key targets that we are expecting to have. On board, up to about 25,000 SMEs, reduce the cost of trade by 40%. AI verified LCs 10 times more in terms of the volume of trade finance documentation that have been processed, and then also have faster LC cycles. Of course, the key metric here being real-time settlement, and also having a 90% first-time right metric, which is very critical because, as I mentioned earlier, 70 to 80% of LC applications would usually have at least one error at the very first submission. So this is how our metric will be looking at. If you look at our last and final slide, what we are essentially then saying is that the corridor is open, the protocol is ready, the moment is now. For Ghanaian SME exporters access to trade finance through AI-guided workflows. Your reputation becomes a collateral. It means that if you continue to produce and deliver, you can only see expansion for your business. For financial institutions, it's important that we join this. As you know, we don't want to be at the back end of innovation, but rather the front end as well. And so even though the NeoFinGo opportunity is open to fintechs, we expect that financial institutions would still remain the backbone and would continue to support as well. The opportunities for especially the banks to be settlement partners. And there are also opportunities for the non-banks to now consider trade finance as a key component of their model, because they are opening the doors to allow SMEs, even at the smallest unit, to be able to tap into trade markets. And then for policymakers, regulators, this becomes more of a governance and standard and replicable model that we can actually use as a digital infrastructure for Africa's growth and expansion in trade. So all in all, we are really excited about this NeoFinGo platform. We believe it offers us a great opportunity to then be able to scale, first and foremost, our trade volumes, and then secondly, to digitize that process, which then creates the financial inclusion for export-ready SMEs. And on that note, I want to thank all of you again. We do look forward to the actual launch of the platform. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Arnold, for that excellent presentation. That really gives us a lot more insight into this program and what you're building towards, which sounds really, really exciting. And as you said, the moment is now. And it's so great that we have so many people from this ecosystem who need to contribute to this. As you already mentioned, our SMEs, our bankers, fintechs, neobanks, people involved in this trade ecosystem, who we have participating here. And I'd encourage everyone to leave your questions in the Q&A. I've already seen some hands being raised within the people already in this room. So we'll now move to a Q&A round. I can see Catherine from ODI has a question. Catherine, I'd ask you to please unmute yourself and ask your question directly to Arnold, please.
Thank you very much, Arnold. My name is Catherine Nwajakudahu. I'm the Director of the Politics and Governance Programme at ODI, and we're delighted to have partnered with you on this. It's excellent to see the presentation and to have all the detail. My question really relates to the evidence, the evaluation piece that you refer to with respect to policymakers. And whilst I was listening to you, I felt that it'd be useful to also include in any evaluation those who maybe blind spots. It's really great to measure the things that you're looking to achieve, but is it possible to anticipate things that you haven't noted? Who might be left out? I noted on your agro the plans to address the issue of smallness of scale of SMEs and to pool them into agroecological parks. As you're thinking of the framework for evaluating and lesson learning, is it possible to also think about some of the possible consequences of that on small and medium-sized enterprises, even though they're eager to move towards export? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And it's very important indeed. I think on the evaluation side, because this is a digital platform, three key things come up also, quite importantly. First would be data protection. How do we ensure that we protect data for all the thousands of people who are now going to become trade finance savvy, so to speak, and then also joining the corridor. Second would be cybersecurity. How resilient and how hacker-free, for instance, is this platform? Would we be able to have people hacking and create fake digital LCs? Would we be able to have settlement risk and all of that? So The cybersecurity issue is one that, for instance, the regulators would be very much keen on addressing, which is to say that to what extent does this expose financial institutions, fintechs, and even money transmission to risk, and how then do we address that? So with these two, I think it's actually quite key to then be able to ensure that NeoFinGo would stand the test of scrutiny to be able to then remain the platform of choice for the regulators and policymakers. Now, to the third point also, it will be important then as we undertake evaluations to also then see what happens to the livelihood changes, across the SME base. And so even at the agro level, how do we see changes occurring in the lives of these smallholder farmers? One of the critical initiatives at 24, for instance, is a program which is the Tamale Airport Cargo Hub, where, for instance, we've identified that the Tamale Airport is the shortest distance to the UK by air from Ghana. And we should then be able to utilize that airport, which currently operates at around 20% capacity, by developing a cargo hub that can deliver, usually in under 4 hours, fruit, vegetables, and flowers to the UK and to the rest of Europe. And that would then mean that you need to organize farmers into these parks and create a fruit and vegetable corridor around Tamale and its environment, in a radius of around perhaps 3-4 hours, by road to then ship these goods to the cargo hub. Now that would also then require some level of evaluation to see where did we start from, what did we have to introduce, and then how did we create the needed impacts to transform lives. And so for us, NeoFinGo is really more about the transformation of lives of these ordinary people who hitherto may not have had a chance then to be able to produce at scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine, for that question, and Arnold for that very insightful answer as well. We have some questions in the chat as well from our attendees. Emmanuel Ansa Amprofi asks, how can exporter associations and production organizations be properly capacitated to meet an all-year-round supply of commodities and products? So yeah, what kind of capacity constraints exist, and what do exporter associations and producer organizations really need to be involved in this ambitious plan for the NeoFinGo trade corridor? And I'll tack on another question by Emmanuel here, which is that how are e-commerce platforms and marketplace actors also a part of this? So I think breaking down perhaps the roles of the different participants in this and what steps need to be taken to really ensure their involvement.
So you want me to address that? All right, that's fine, sure. So let me then start from the e-commerce part. Of course, I think what the e-commerce does is the front end. And so you're going to see people come online, place orders, and then be able to expect delivery. But the strength of e-commerce is also the order fulfillment and delivery, which what then happens is NeoFinGo actually sees to one end, which is to ensure that after orders have been placed and demands have been made of a product, then NeoFinGo serves as a platform to allow for payments to be effected smoothly. Because these are cross-border payment for commodities, obviously, then you need to undertake the necessary documentation that's required. And so the part that 24 then plays is really to come in and build together with the private sector the infrastructure that allows for delivery and which is what we spoke as our market systems transformation or Connect 24 plan, to create the logistics, transport, or multimodal transport framework or backbone that allows delivery to then be made on time to the various markets. So that is really how the e-commerce can be plugged into it. So e-commerce would remain the front end. NeoFinGo remains the engine that enables e-commerce to thrive.
Thanks so much. And one more similar question from Moses Kanduri, in that a lot of freelancers, a lot of individuals are already using cryptocurrency to receive payments globally. And so, is there a role for cryptocurrency in the kinds of, on the payment system side of NeoFingo? Is there some kind of opportunity or that any of the developers have thought about here?
I believe being a digital platform, it means that NeoFingo would be crypto ready in a lot of ways. However, because it's also working in a regulatory environment, its ability to then adopt cryptos will be subject to what regulation demands. So, for instance, Ghana has just passed the Virtual Assets and Service Providers Directive by the regulators at the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then but mainly spearheaded by the Bank of Ghana. What it then means is that it's actually now created a framework under which virtual assets, of which cryptos are part, can now either be issued or accepted by the public. Now, in the evolvement or in the evolution of NeoFingo, the partners would want to then look at these aspects and then begin to adopt the various cryptos that are allowable by both parties. I mean, because if payments are being made, for instance, from the UK into Ghana, or when it expands into other African countries, or payments are being made across Africa, the value of a crypto or its worth is really based on, first and foremost, who the issuer is, secondly, who is paying and who's accepting. Once all these parties are in agreement, I don't think that will be a challenge. So I would say that the crypto discussion would evolve with the growth of the NeoFingo platform. And as it does, given how NeoFingo is being built, it would actually then evolve nicely into that if it has to.
Thanks so much. That was really helpful. And another question from Anushka Sisodia, which is that if NeoFingo is developing as a set of open standards, which actors and organizations need to be developed in this? And what would the process of developing this as open standards look like at a regional and global level?
Yeah, so these standards would always be subject to the laws, the prevailing laws. And so in whichever markets that NeoFingo will be expanding into, there'll first be the local dynamics, local regulatory demands, and then secondly, international laws as well. And so, for instance, NeoFingo today hangs primarily on the ETDA 2023 from the UK, but essentially it would have to be plugged into the ETA of Ghana, would have to be plugged into KYC AML of Ghana as well. And so essentially these standards would evolve. You have the international standards, then you have the local standards as well, and they would have to be in sync at all times so that then it allows for the smooth participation of all players and then a smooth insurance of trade finance instruments.
Great. Well, thanks so much for that. There's only one final question, which is more operational. Someone has asked, is there a chance to watch the session again later? Yes, the webinar is being recorded and is going to be available on the event page at ODI Global. We'll share the link here shortly with you, as well as after as an email, so you can catch all of this and including the presentations and the speakers later as a recorded event. I think that's all the questions we've received so far. Oh, there's one other from New Pos in Ghana, which the question is, what criteria do you follow to add creative consultants and technology consultants like UX and content designers to serve the UK and other markets? So what is I suppose what the question really is, how do creative consultants and technology consultants get involved in the NeoFingo development process, or if they're interested?
Yes, so I think that process goes through the partnership engagement. And so there would be some level of feedback loops. I mean, once you have Ghanaian fintechs adopting NeoFinGo, we would expect that really as part of the onboarding process for SMEs and all of that, we should see that some feedback can immediately begin to feed into what can happen. So a good example would be where, assuming at the development stages currently, NeoFingo onboarding portals are asking for zip codes and all of that. I mean, that immediately becomes an issue from a Ghana perspective because from a KYC point of view, you are more likely to look at Ghana Post GPS or digital address system, which is local, and we should be able to then use this kind of addressing system to plug in into what is expected on the other side. And so the nuances of this would always, and I think that the collaboration so far, based on all the work being done with all the partners, suggests that it's actually one that would allow for a lot of UX UI from local participation. You essentially don't want to change the architecture, but you want to make it resilient in a way that takes in feedback from all interested parties. And then, so I do see how local fintechs can actually feed into the feedback loop to ensure that the product or the platform evolves in a way that serves the interest of as many businesses as possible or as many stakeholders as possible. See.
Thank you. And a similar question again is, are these opportunities also available to first timers who have an interest in entering the export business, or are these links currently only for people who are already exporting to the UK? So is there, I suppose, to paraphrase, is something being done to bring in people who are interested in becoming part of this from the export side, from the SME side? I'm sorry, Arnold appears to have dropped out for now. We can maybe wait for him to come back. Otherwise, if oh, Arnold, you're back. Yeah.
Yes,
Did you catch that question?
no, if you can.
It was yeah. The question was on opportunities for first timers who have an interest in entering the export business. So for any of these onboarding processes for being a part of the NeoFingo process, is it open? Will it be open to people who have interest in being in the export business, or is it only open to people who are already exporting to the UK?
I think primarily the people who are also going to be the biggest beneficiaries with the startups, because essentially once you can identify markets in the UK today, the ease of doing business across borders is actually made much easier for you. And so this is an opportunity open and available for startups, especially. And it makes it even much easier for you to. So essentially, what we've done, and what NeoFingo has then done, is to reduce drastically the barrier for being able to step into the export market, and this would be of great benefit to startups. So yes, the door is open for startups here.
Thank you. We have another question from King Carl Tornam Duho. The question is, how is implementation being carried out, and is there a structured piloting way to handle implementation? King also adds that as a policy analyst from Ghana, over time, most platforms fail because we implement without piloting well and without structured piloting to understand and evaluate what has caused the failures. So I think this relates maybe to Catherine's question at the beginning as well around evaluation. But is the pilot structured in a way where I suppose we can learn from the mistakes and iterate further?
Yes, very well. And I think we did address that in the presentation to say, I mean, first and foremost, at the foundation stage, this is going to be a 1 to 5 month period where we actually going to test this, put this on the sandbox, have about 5 fintechs, have about 50 exporters to test it, and then we can have learnings from it. And it is in those learnings that would now evolve the platform to then begin to look at the process of scale. So essentially, what we are seeking to do is not just a one-off platform that allows us to facilitate trade between the UK, but eventually, and which is also why we have the Africa Trade Hub as well in our midst, because eventually the learnings from the Ghana UK trade corridor would actually now be cascaded to other countries as well. And we've mentioned going live in Sierra Leone, in Nigeria, in Kenya, and hopefully later on to the rest of Africa as well. So there's a lot of work that's going to happen. And at every stage, we'll need to take the learnings from one into the other. And that's what we're doing. So no, this would not be like another product where we are not learning from the challenges that we are facing and we are allowing that to seep through. This is actually more of a learning engine to ensure that trade can happen and then it can happen effectively.
Great. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for all of your really interesting and engaging questions. We're now going to move on to the next part of this webinar, which is a technical presentation on the concept draft behind NeoFinGo, which is going to be presented by Kwajo Brempon from the EFTA Hub. Kwajo, welcome, and please, whenever you're ready, you can share your screen.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kwajo Brempon. I'm the technical consultant from EFTA Hub. So I'm going to take you through the lecture of NeoFinGo and how we plan to implement this in the long term. So I'll have to keep my video off, turn off my video to stabilize my connection. So I'll be sharing my screen shortly, my slides here. Can you confirm if you can see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slide.
So what I'm going to do in this session is to just walk you through how NeoFinGo is building this infrastructure for trusted digital trade between UK and so focus
Sorry,
on how we solve this.
Kwajo, could you make
Yeah.
your slides full screen if possible?
Okay. Give me a minute.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, we can see your slides now, but we can't hear you if you're speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so yes. So before we talk about the solution that we are implementing here at NeoFinGo, we need to understand what the problem actually is. So the current trade finance system is not broken. It just doesn't favor SMEs. So it still takes up to like 10 days to move documents around. So the paper-bound letters of credit issue. So in a typical scenario, what happens is once you get your documentation as a trader, you need to fill it and ship it to the bank, the person bank. And usually we found out that there are first-time applications with have errors. So shipping the documents to these banks takes up to 10 days. So if you have errors, just get it back to you, and then you have to refill, correct your errors, and then send it back to them. So you are taking too much time, which can take up to like 4 weeks of delay to get your letters of credit approved. Now there is a fragmented data issue where there is no interoperable, know your customer, know your client, or know your business response. So every application comes with its own cost, its own time wasting, and all the delay that comes with it. So that is the fragmented data issue. Now, siloed messaging. So we don't have systems talking to each other, right? Banks don't speak the same digital language. Systems don't connect, right? So that is what we are solving, the current issue. And then the legal recognition issue. Until recently, until when UK passed the electronic and then electronic trade documents in 2023, electronic documents were not imperative, like comparable when it comes to veracity to manual data, manual documents filled in paper or paperwork. So we are solving that part too. So the full stack architecture is on 4 layers, which I'll be touching on as I go on in my presentation. So the first layer is connectivity, how systems talk to each other. And then we have the intelligence layer, that is the AI, which empowers all the trade partners to instantly check the data and to verify the veracity or the data presented instantly to give you feedback. The third layer is the trust and identity, where we are building trust across borders. And the fourth layer is where everything is enforceable. So all 4 layers must work together, otherwise there will be no trust in the system. So the ISO 20022 messaging, the standardized messaging for banks, right? For banks and at that level. At the base, we use it for the global financial messaging. Instead of sending PDFs that humans read, we send structured data where machines can actually pick and understand. So in practical example would be, instead of sending an email with an invoice, the system sends the metadata, like the amount, the buyer information, the shipment, the date, which will be instantly readable by any bank in any banking system. So this removes the manual processing and reduces the error that involves or comes with it. Now, the third point, the other point would be the API gateway and then endpoint architecture. I don't want to bore you with the technicalities, so I'll just jump into it. What we use is the hub model, where banks and fintechs connect once, and they are connected to everyone. So, for example, the Ghanaian fintech integrating with 10 UK banks separately. What you do is you integrate with NeoFinGo once, and then you stay connected. While at NeoFinGo, what we ensure is secure endpoints, the KYC, trusted KYC, KYB information, where we give you the opportunity to sanction or restrict traders if they raise any false flag or any red flag. And then we have trusted settlement system. Right. The next layer, which is the AI intelligence engine. This is where the transformation actually happens. So AI, we know AI systems today can easily read plenty documents and summarize it for you quickly. Now, the AI integrated in NeoFinGo actually reads and picks all the important information and checks them instantly like your digital compliance. So an example would be if you are shipping documents, say, Tema, your document you are filled says you are shipping from Tema, but then your letter of credit says Afrad. The system actually flags it immediately. All these discrepancies in the system that you may not immediately see, but at the point of approval will be detected, and then you will lose the approval. So you will be able to see all this instantly, correct your errors, and then make a proper application. So AI doesn't make the final decision here. It's just helping people to make the right choice, giving them accuracy and speed. Now, the trust and identity layer. Now, trust being the biggest thing in trade. Secondary to next to it is the money. People have to trust you before they give you their money, obviously. So the global ID, that is the LEI, the legal entity identifiers, is for global businesses. What we are doing is to just touch into that and then give you spread that information or that ID on the platform where all banks or institutions that are trading can actually see who is actually trading or who they are trading with, know the very important details about the trader, and then proceed with the trade. We at AfterHub, what we are also doing is to create that repository for identity with after numbers, where trader identity is tied to the after number, where you can actually fetch full information, shareable information by any trader before you move on with your trade with the after numbers. So an example will be once your business is verified on NeoFinGo, you don't have to repeat the KYC process for every bank. Banks can actually fetch the information from the platform instantly, know as much as the details as they need to either approve or reject your application for the LCs. Now, the layer 4, which is the ETBA 2023, based on that, I talked about it briefly, how UK Trade Documents Act 2023 actually approved that digital documents are actually legally binding, right? So technology is not alone. Technology alone is not enough here. It must also hold up legally. So UK law actually recognized the digital trade documents, and then a digital bill of lading is now enforceable as a paper one. So yes, we are building on that. This is what unlocks the real financing. So taking out the delay, taking out the errors, based on this new act passed by UK, we can actually help empower traders, SMEs, which are the backbone of the African economy, to plug into NeoFinGo and to actually apply with the digital information and documentation. Now, the compliance matrix mapping. So you have this table here. What we are trying to say is everything is mapped onto existing regulation. We are not trying to think outside the box or trying to create something new. We are playing within the system. What we are trying to do is to make it easily accessible and inclusive. So banks don't need new rules. This works within the current laws that we have. So that is the compliance mapping matrix for NeoFinGo. Now, talking about the cybersecurity and data integrity, we know when you open trade like this, characters try to take advantage of it. So yes, security is one of the key things, the fundamental thing for NeoFinGo. And then once we win the trust, we also secure, once we have a secure system, we win the trust of people or traders. So our encryption process is done, top notch. We have the multi-factor authentication, modern global standards to ensure fraud detection easily and quickly. So every transaction is secure, traceable, and auditable. So that is actually what we are presenting with NeoFinGo in our data security and integrity system. Now, the settlement and liquidity structure or architecture. This is how the money actually moves. When you go to UK banking system uses the FPS, the CHAPS, the SWIFT, and GB for GB and FX settlements. In Ghana or in Africa, we have the SWIFT, we have the RTDS, we have the PAPS, which came out of the Free Trade Area Agreement for local settlements across Africa member states. So what we are trying to do is to plug into all these to simplify the payment systems. We are not replacing them, to make it direct, to make it easy. Funds can easily move through UK system like the FPS, the fast payment system, and the African systems like PAPS for traders and buyers to sort of engage and trade successfully. So liquidity flows more efficiently across borders in this window. Now, the MCP and data interoperability. So all data follow global standards. So we are not creating, like I mentioned earlier, we are not creating something. We are playing within the current regulatory framework. No vendor is locked in. This is open system for banks and traders and vendors alike. We are not also launching everything at once. We are breaking it in phases. We are building the foundation. We are piloting to, like Arnold mentioned, with certain number of traders, and then we are scaling from there. So the data entities and identifiers, which is the unique identifiers for each transaction tied to each trader, and the compliance artifacts, know your customer, know your business part, the AML, CFT, which is to prevent money laundering, anti-money laundering laws and framework. We are just plugging within that to ensure systems are very legal and then working as it's supposed to be. So yeah, this is the technical roadmap. Arnold gave just a summary of how we plan to implement this, launch this. Like I mentioned in my previous slide, we are not launching everything at a go. We are starting well. We are piloting right, and then we are scaling, learning from the information we are getting, and the people actually using the product. That is what we are actually doing with NeoFinGo. Now, what NeoFinGo, like I mentioned, is not a closed system. It's an open protocol system. Banks join the pilot. Fintechs integrate with NeoFinGo, like I mentioned earlier on, once. You don't have to integrate with all the multiple banks in the UK for this. And the regulators also collaborate with us while we work on this. So these are the layers of protocols that we are actually observing. The security and compliance is there. The regulators are players. Fintech distributors are part of it. And then we have the banks and EMIs also as a major part of it. So that is what we are doing with NeoFinGo engagement protocol to get everybody involved in this. So we have a very successful product out there, which will actually ensure a free, easy movement of trade and funds across borders. That is primarily between UK and the African market. All right, so that is a summary of the technical architecture that I have to present. So I'll say thank you for your attention, and I'll be open to any questions.
Thanks so much, Quadra. That was an excellent presentation and really went into the kind of details of what it takes to build something like this. And it's great to see the After Hub participating in this as well. I want to ask our attendees as well as our panelists online if there's any specific questions on the technical details. Of course, this is a very high level conversation in terms of what people need to know in order to understand the NeoFinGo and what's going on at the back end. Very, very important. So if anyone has any clarifications for Quadro or any questions about, how this is working at the back end, what it's going to take to make some of these interoperable protocols work and these open standards functional, feel free to leave some questions in the chat. Yep. And if not, we could also close out today's meeting and today's webinar. Of course, we're always available to answer some of these questions for you. This presentation and all of our speakers will also be posted online on the event page. Quadro, any final remarks from you on this? Sorry, Samlara, you want to come in? Yes.
Divij, I'll jump in. Hi. So I wanted to, Kojo, this is for you. I just want to see if there's any way to expound on we noted that one of the biggest frustrations for Ghanaian exporters is that rejection component. We talked a little bit about the LC application coming back and sometimes little discrepancies. And so as we move with NeoFinGo, and we know that there's a change in that experience. We're saying that it's coming out from AI validation against the ICC, against the protocols. Can you speak a little bit more to that and expound on that so that people understand what type of the question I've received is that, is it a long drawn out process? How does it work? How are we certain that we're going to alleviate the concern that they have? Can you speak to that, please?
So currently, the challenge we have is where we have people having these filling the forms and making some simple errors, mailing them to the receiving banks or traders or partners, and then they sending them back to them because it takes multiple days to actually confirm, very manual process. So with us, then what we are doing is you have instant check. You can immediately get a feedback on the errors. Like I mentioned, if there is a discrepancy, for example, like you selected Temakot, but then there's Takrade as the exit point. Some of these little things, even though they seem very minimal, these are the reasons for rejection. When you fill your forms and you send them to these partners or receiving banks and they see that they don't really understand, they will not overlook it because they have to ensure everything checks out perfectly as it should, according to the standard, right? So the immediate feedback is a game changer. So instead of waiting for like 10 days, up to like 10 days for your documents to reach the destination, they taking like extra 4 days to review and then identifying these minor errors and then shipping them back to you, taking extra days. That is the problem, right? So immediately you fill your forms, digital documents, you will get to know where the errors are and how to correct instantly. So that is the game changer here. You are saving the time, saving the money for the traders and partners alike. So that is NeoFinGo. I don't know if this addresses your question very well.
Thanks so much, Quadro. Another question online that we received is what institution is responsible for the development and management of the NeoFinGo platform as it stands? Yeah, if you or Anand would like to answer any of that.
Yeah, so this is a partnership between AfterHub and partner institutions. So AfterHub is like the technical partner in charge of the group.
Thank you. I'll wait for a few more seconds for additional questions from the attendees, if possible. And in the meanwhile, I'd also like to encourage everybody who may be in London that and of course in Accra, that we're also hosting a hybrid London Accra a high-level event where many of these questions are also going to be discussed. Samlara, please. Go ahead.
So I'm getting a couple questions via WhatsApp.
Sure. Oh yeah, of course, please.
So I will say, for a business that doesn't really have much of a credit history. So this question is really speaking to Smart Record, the concept. Kojo, do you want to speak to when they don't have much of a credit history, how do you build that? How does NeoFinGo kind of bridge that gap?
Right. So I mean, the whole idea of NeoFinGo is to get SMEs, first-time traders, actually involved. Right? We are not just focusing on the big transactions, the bigger businesses, well-established businesses. So SMEs can take advantage of it. The documents are filled perfectly. So all the banks, what they need is to ensure that there's not much risk, right? We know the African market, those little transactions adding up can be huge, right? For SMEs or smaller scale businesses. So the whole idea is for the SMEs to actually plug into it and play. So we are just picking up your information, your trade data, using the AfterHub platform, your unique identifier on AfterHub, that is your After number, and presenting all that to the banks or the traders and our trade partners. So you can actually present a comprehensive data to ensure or to give that kind of credibility test to the bankers or to the banks or the new banks, so they can actually give you the opportunity to also trade. So that is the whole goal of NeoFinGo.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and Samara, please feel free to unmute and filter through any questions that are coming to you separately.
I think that's all. I think everything else has been answered. I think we're heading towards the end of our program. Shall we? Any other questions before we hit closing remarks? Mohammed just shared one. One challenge SMEs face is access to market. Is there any such opportunities on your platform, please? Arnold or Kujo, do you want to take that?
Or Donald, if you have anything to
Hi, Samara, would you want to read out the question again, please?
One challenge SMEs face is access to market. Is there such opportunity on this platform to increase their access to market? And I'll add a second question. Does the NeoFinGo provide financing or link exporters to the financial institutions? So maybe we can speak to that as well.
All right, that's fine. Thank you. So I think access to market would actually be the responsibility of like 24-hour authority and then also Ghana Export Promotion Authority. So we'll be working hand in hand to first and foremost open up markets that then enable. So essentially, what NeoFinGo will then do is that it enables that access to market, but the actual access would have to be created by us, the institutions that are partnering with NeoFinGo, because NeoFinGo is a platform on which that access to market now becomes feasible for exporters to ride on to receive payments. What we would then do, and that dovetails into your next question around access to finance. And so essentially, as you can see, settlements on NeoFinGo can happen same day, which is actually unique and novel because typically with LCs, then they are usually a minimum of about 14 days. Now, it is then possible on the back of what is evolving to then have financial institutions actually offer finance because on NeoFinGo, it's a digital LC that's been created. You're supposed to supply X amount of goods by this date. Perhaps you need some funding to then be able to execute or to purchase supplies and produce and meet an order. The strength of the platform, obviously, which is really why it makes it easier for this to even become collateral-free lending, because the strength of the platform would then allow for us, especially on the same day settlement, to then allow for financial institutions to say, look, we can take a risk on you. Once you've received an order, go ahead, have this funding, produce and meet the demand, and then let's see. So the presence of NeoFinGo would obviously also evolve into additional products that allow the platform to thrive. And that's how this would evolve over time.
Thank you. We have another question from Stanley Montwedi, who says that trade finance is only one layer of trade. In practice, many of the biggest frictions sit upstream and downstream of finance, in documentation, compliance, shipment visibility, and in cross-border process coordination. How is this corridor initiative ensuring that digital trade finance connects into the wider trade execution workflow rather than only solving the financing segment? Arnold, would you like to answer
that? If you can take that again for me, please.
Sure. The question is, how is this Digital Trade Corridor initiative ensuring that digital trade finance connects into the wider trade execution workflow, including documentation, compliance, shipment visibility, rather than only solving the financial segment?
So this actually runs in parallel to all of that. What it means is that once you are going through NeoFinGo, you don't have to go through the whole bank LC confirmation sites and all of that process, because NeoFinGo is digitizing that process and making you establish these LCs in real time, which then means that all the additional documentation needed, bill of lading and all of that now becomes almost instantaneously available. So we are not only solving the problem for the volume of documentation that's needed with the establishment of a traditional LC, we're also solving the problem for the number of players you'd have to work with to enable this to happen. So it's not so much about so when we talk about trade finance, it's not so much about financing for trade. It's really about a parallel system that runs, or a system that runs in parallel to the existing LC establishment system, which actually now allows you a faster process to execute your trade orders.
Great. Thanks so much for that. I think that's all the questions that we have. There's a question from Grace as well, and another question earlier, which I think we should clarify from New Pos on the institution which is controlling the platform. So just to clarify, of course, our 24-hour secretary, 24-hour authority, AFTA Hub, and Bank of Ghana are all coordinating, I think, on the technical details. ODI is helping socialize and kind of, helping the partners put together the UK to Ghana links, including both for this webinar, but also on the 26th for a high-level in-person event. For which registration is also open on our website, which will take place at the ODI offices and simultaneously at the Bank of Ghana headquarters. On the development of the protocol itself, I think are the institutions that are responsible for the kind of technical development. I'm sure, Arnold, perhaps you can answer that question better.
I need to get it again, the question, yes.
The question is, I think, which institution essentially is controlling and developing the NeoFinGo platform?
Yeah, good. So essentially, there are a number of stakeholders. You have the developers, you have the promoters, you have the enablers, and then you have the regulators. Okay, so the Bank of Ghana would have to approve NeoFinGo. The Bank of Ghana would regulate NeoFinGo. And so this NeoFinGo goes live subject to regulatory approval. In terms of promotion, so you have ODI Global, which essentially is set up to facilitate and to ensure that there's trade, there's development across jurisdictions. And then you have the FCDO, which is actually also a UK entity responsible for, foreign cooperation, development, trade, and all of that. And so these institutions are taking advantage of the UK Electronic Trade Documentations Act, which actually allows for digitization of trade documentation to then promote the development of a platform which can be used to digitize trade between Ghana and the UK. Now, at the Ghana level, we had a 24-hour authority which is embarking on a national transformation project. And so it steps in to then partner to say this can become a platform that we can actually sign up or onboard SMEs on to allow them to be on a transformation journey. And then you have the Export Promotion Authority, which is actually set up by law to promote exports and to help SMEs to access markets and be in the space. And so all of these partners will be working together. And we have the AFTA Hub, or the Africa Free Trade Hub, which essentially also exists to help SMEs to trade across borders. And so once we've tested the Ghana-UK trade corridor, once we've expanded into UK Ghana, UK Nigeria, UK Sierra Leone, UK Kenya, we've created a platform that can now be easily used for across Africa trade as well. So that overnight you have a platform that is actually boosting and ensuring that trade across Africa is seamless and without restraints and barriers as we currently have. So all in all, this is how the ecosystem is going to evolve. And for the first time, what it also means, which is really why NeoFinGo is critical for today's discussion, is that for the first time, we are now going to have non-bank actors and players also involved in the trade process. So it doesn't have to be your bank that actually facilitates a letter of credit transaction for you, but your fintech can actually do that because of the tools that are being used for the platform. So it means that we've essentially included a lot more players. And so your fintech, together with its settlement or partner bank, can now have products for you. And so maybe on an app or a portal today, you can now create your LCs and enable transactions with your buyer, which makes it much easier for trade transactions to then happen. And that's how the NeoFinGo ecosystem is going to be playing out.
Thanks, Arnold. I think that clarifies a lot. There's a final question from Mohammed Aval as well, which is that, is there a financial module to support SMEs as part of this? So does NeoFinGo have a specific financial module which provides access to SMEs?
You're referring to a financial module. So I think then again, we need to separate finance from trade. Okay, to establish a trade relationship or a trade transaction with a buyer, someone who's importing into their country, someone you're exporting to, there needs to be a set of documentations that you would then have to put in place. Now, the funding that happens or the funding that occurs to make that happen is what you refer to as trade finance. Okay, and so trade finance would go in tandem with trade documentation. NeoFinGo solves the trade documentation problem, and because it also uses the fintechs, it then makes the trade finance angle easier, essentially, which is what results in same-day settlement. So because everything is online real time, it means that instead of a traditional 2-week to 1 month settlement and depends on, so for instance, in traditional bank, you have what you call your site LCs, you have your standby LCs and all of that. And all of these have standard timelines for when you be paid. But with NeoFinGo, same-day settlement can become possible because of how digitized the platform is. And on the back of that, banks can then develop additional financial instruments to support the trade transactions. And that's what makes it very unique. Yeah. And also timely indeed for all that we are doing now.
Great. Thanks so much for that. And I think that's all the questions we have. And sorry, Samlara, yes, you have another question.
There's one more from Tenko.
Sure.
And he's asking, and I think you've touched on it in a couple different ways, but I do want to make sure his question is heard. How exactly is NeoFinGo moving Ghanaians SMEs from local operation to real sustained access in the UK market? Not just visibility, but actual trade transactions.
I think one of the things that would have to happen, and institutions like 24, like Ghana Export Promotion, would continue to play a facilitating role. But a lot of the work would have to be done by SMEs and then their clusters. So it will be important for Ghanaian SMEs to now evolve into clusters. And clusters are a higher version of an association or a network or a chamber. So today, a lot of Ghanaian companies operate in chambers, some in associations, some in councils. You need to move into a cluster setting. So a cluster setting is where, for instance, if you had your, let's say, green pepper. I mean, the UK consumption of green pepper, you'd be surprised, stands at close to maybe about 100 million pounds. Now, that kind of figure if you translate it locally, can employ easily 10 to 30,000 people involved in the production of green pepper for the UK market. What you need is for the cluster of green pepper producers to make a business trip, move into the UK to meet with pepper suppliers, to sign contracts, to create deals and all of that. And then what a platform like NeoFinGo then does is to enable the documentation for moving this across borders much easier than what a traditional bank letter of credit process would do. And that's what makes it different. And so the real business of having to get orders, secure orders, have market access would always have to be what the SMEs themselves do. And institutions like 24-hour can play a part, export promotion can play a part, but the real business has to be owned by the producers and exporters, and they must move into markets and look for opportunities, look for business, look for, I always speak about an incident that occurred many years ago. There was a story about onion farmers in Keta who had harvested so much onion, and some of the onions were going to waste. And this story actually cuts across the entire country in terms of what happens with a lot of harvests. And when I read, and this was on the center page of the Daily Graphic, and I'd read this story and how onion farmers were calling for help and all of that. And then that evening, on my way after work, I was listening to the BBC, and there was a protest in Cairo. And the anchor was saying, "Can you imagine what the protest in Cairo is about?" And then she now says, "Let's head over to our correspondent in Cairo." And then the correspondent says, "Well, Egyptians are protesting because there's a shortage of onions in Cairo." So you have onions in Qatar, which is rotting away, and you have a shortage of onions in Egypt. You need to marry the two. And it can easy to say, oh, the government has to go there, get the orders. But I think we must also, which is why we are now creating also the agro parks, so that the agro parks are not just places where farmers gather to farm, but they can also be businesses that promote the interests of the park produce. You need our business people how to go out there, look for orders. I mean, if you're an association of 1,000 farmers, look for orders, come back, spread the orders across the various farmers, and then execute these contracts. And NeoFinGo now is a platform where you get to do this much faster and speedily. And so that's really what we are looking at with this. Thank you.
I think I'll ask that we do have one last question. I'm going to combine. Well, we have a few questions that just hopped in. We are heading to time, so I'll ask all three at once. And then if you don't mind sharing, or I can share a little insight on Thursday's event. So the first question, I'll ask from the bottom up. So documentation like LCs and all such similar trade docs will have to be secured by the SMEs, but will now process these documentations through NeoFinGo. And NeoFinGo will make the processing of the documentation faster with partner banks. Is that what it is about? I can actually say yes in small part. But Tanko also asks a futuristic question. If NeoFinGo succeeds at scale, what will Ghana UK trade look like in the next 5 years? And that's one I'm excited about because I love the response to this, what the response to this question will be. And then the last one came from Stanley a little bit ago. How are you thinking about a broader product set that reflects actual SME needs and operating models rather than assuming LC-led trade finance?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So LC-led trade finance is the standard for trade across the world. Now, you'd recognize that Africa is basically a very low percentage of global trade, which is single digit. In Ghana, for instance, we don't do a lot of LC-led trade. Most of our LC trades are essentially in oil and gas imports, and then maybe rice and edible oils, and then that's all. Most of it is what you call bills for collection. And so once you cite the documentation, then you process the transaction. But the rest of the world actually operates on LCs, which are standardized. So the way I'll then answer all the questions is first and foremost the question around the documentation on LCs and similar trade, which will have to be secured by SMEs, but will now process these documentations through NoFinGo. No. NoFinGo is not process. What NoFinGo is doing is digitizing the LC creation process. So that whereas it takes sometimes 2 to 3 weeks for you to be able to establish an LC through a bank, with NeoFinGo, you can actually make it happen in minutes for you. So NeoFinGo trade documentation process because it's digitized. It's taking traditional LC creation documentation and digitizing that process so that it's much, much easier to handle. It reduces errors and all of that, which then goes to if NeoFinGo succeeds at scale, what will Ghana UK trade look like in the next 5 years? It could blow up exponentially because it means that we would have reduced the level of paperwork involved. We would have also included so many SMEs which hitherto could not undertake export properly, and then would have also then allowed existing SMEs who are currently exporting to have expanded much, much larger than they currently do. What it would then also look like is that it would give us a picture of how we can adopt NeoFinGo or similar technologies to other trade corridors. So that, for instance, we are doing Ghana UK, then we would do Sierra Leone UK, then we'll do Kenya UK, then we'll do Nigeria UK. And if it all works well, then it means that NeoFinGo becomes a platform for Ghana, Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and across the sub-region and the continent altogether. So this essentially is how it's going to evolve. And what it would then require is that we would help the SMEs to be able to come on board. But beyond we helping them, they would have to be in the driving seat to then run their businesses forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arnold. We're at time. So any closing remarks that you'd like to share?
Well, so we want to just invite our key stakeholders, the fintechs and the banks especially, to the launch. It would happen at the Bank of Ghana Square, which is why we restrict attendance to the fintechs and then the financial institutions. And essentially, we would hope then to be able to delve into the technicalities of the platform as well and how we would use it beyond just facilitating trade, so also then finance trade. And I think that for a platform like this, we would want to ensure that it goes beyond just the talking to doing. Ghana has had so many opportunities to undertake trade. We had the AGWA, which is the Africa Group Opportunity Act. And if you look at our trade volumes, we spent more time in conferences and seminars talking about AGWA than we spent on factory floors, increasing production to export. And eventually AGWA ended last year. When it did, I think it's now been renewed, but of course, with all the trade tariffs and all of that, there seems to be no much focus. We've had Africa Free Trade for some years now, and the volumes that does not look like we are taking much advantage of trade across Africa to boost employment, to increase production, and all that. And so we are eager at the 24-Hour Economy Authority to ensure that this does not become another talking platform, but it becomes a doing platform, and which is why we've put in a lot of energy to make sure that SMEs are not just spoken to. We don't just do training, but would ensure really that trade happens and happens fast enough. So we look forward to seeing how this goes to really help a lot of Ghanaian businesses.
Thank you so much. And for everyone on the call, please note that the link in the chat is available. You can certainly follow along on Thursday's event as well. We will have a live link. So look forward to seeing all of you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.